Today's story is both shocking and complicated, taking not just a year but nearly a decade to find any justice. It's about a 21-year-old nun whose brutal murder in 1992 was finally solved after 28 years in December 2020. This is the story of Sister Abhaya. This story begins in the quiet town of Kottayam, Kerala back in 1992. Like many other Christian areas in Kerala, Kottayam was a peaceful place with churches and convents scattered all around. These places of worship were an important part of life for the people living there. One of the well-known convents in the area was the St. Pa's, the 10th convent. It had a hostel where many young women came to study and stay, many of whom were also nuns. Among these women was 21-year-old Sister Abhaya, a dedicated young woman who had come to the convent to serve God and help others. Sister Abhaya was studying at a pre-degree college, and like any student, she had exams coming up. Determined to do well, she decided to wake up early one morning to get some extra studying done. She set her alarm, went to bed, and woke up around 4 a.m. After greeting a few of her friends in the convent, she sat down to begin her studies. Around that time, she felt the need to take a short break. She left her books and went to the kitchen, possibly to drink some water or splash her face with cold water to stay awake the next morning. When the other nuns woke up, they noticed something unusual. Sister Abhaya was missing. This seemed strange to them. When they went to the kitchen, they found a water bottle with its cap open, water spilled on the floor, and one of Sister Abhaya's slippers lying there. But where was Sister Abhaya? No one knew. The search became more urgent, and soon they found Sister Abhaya's other slipper near the convent's well, and when one of the nuns went near the well and looked inside, she was terrified to see Sister Abhaya's lifeless body. The fire department arrived. The police were called, and eventually Sister Abhaya's body was pulled out of the well. The nuns and hostel residents were in complete shock. Just the night before, they had shared dinner with her, laughed, made plans for the future, and even got annoyed by her early morning alarm. Now that same friend was being carried out lifeless from the well. The local police officer V.V. Augustine arrived as part of the usual process after the body was recovered. He wrote a report, called a photographer to take pictures of the scene in the body, and then sent the body for an autopsy. During the autopsy, doctors noticed cuts and bruises, found a head injury, and listed the cause of death as drowning. Even though Sister Abhaya had a head injury, the cause of death was still marked as suicide with the possibility of murder. At that time, many people found this explanation hard to believe. Why would Sister Abhaya set an alarm just to end her life? The fridge door was left open, the bottle's cap was off, water was spilled, and her slipper was left on the floor. Everything seemed too hurried. The story didn't make sense to people. Many believed that this wasn't a suicide, but a murder. They also felt that someone was trying to cover up the truth, especially because the incident took place inside a convent. Sister Abhaya's death took place in a convent where hundreds of girls came to study, learn about religion, and live. Such a tragic event happening in a place like that was very unusual. This incident, along with the suspected cover-up, deeply unsettled the community. An activist named Joan Puen Pericli formed a committee to seek justice. On April 16th, the case was handed over to the crime branch. After a few months of investigation, the crime branch released its report. The case was taken out of the local police's hands and given to the crime branch, who spent months investigating. In the end, they concluded that Sister Abhaya's death was a suicide. By then, Sister Abhaya had already been buried and her clothes were destroyed, leaving very little medical evidence behind. However, the case had become a huge topic of discussion in Kerala. The media was full of stories, and people across the state were coming up with their own theories about what had really happened. The nuns were unhappy with how things were going. There was pressure from the media, from activists, and even from society itself. Naturally, the case was passed to a higher authority. The Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, took over, and a fresh investigation began. The CBI started with a new approach, looking for fresh clues and talking to old witnesses again. Everything seemed to be moving smoothly, but then something very strange and shocking happened. A CBI officer, Vargas P. Thomas, held a press conference in 1994 and revealed something surprising. He said that he had been under pressure to declare the case as a suicide. Because of this, he chose to leave his job almost 9 years before he was supposed to retire. You can imagine the chaos that followed his statement. The case became a big news story again. People couldn't understand why it was getting so confusing. Where was this pressure coming from? Why was the case so difficult to solve? The CBI team continued to investigate for quite some time, even though they didn't have much medical proof. Later, they carried out several dummy tests. They made a doll the same size and weight as Sister Abhaya and threw it into the well in different ways. They carefully observed where the doll got injured and compared those injuries to the ones found on Sister Abhaya. However, even after these tests, no clear answers came up. So in 1996, 3 years after the investigation started, a report was submitted. It stated, "We believe this should be treated as a murder case. We tried everything possible to find out who might be responsible for this tragic event, but despite all our efforts, we couldn't get any solid results." 4 years after the incident, despite the efforts of the local police, the crime branch, and now the CBI, we still didn't know what really happened to Sister Abhaya. The earlier report was rejected and a new CBI team was assigned. This new team carried out another investigation, and by 1999, 3 years later, they came to the conclusion that Sister Abhaya's death seemed like a murder. The main reason for this conclusion was the medical findings. This time, not just one doctor, but a group of 3 doctors looked at the body. They found several injuries that were not mentioned in the first post-mortem report. These injuries had been missed earlier. Now let's go back to the day of the incident. Many nuns were at the convent and noticed more injuries on Sister Abhaya's body. Vivi Augustine, the officer I talked about earlier, had even called a photographer to the scene. The photographer closely examined Sister Abhaya's body and took pictures that showed extra marks of injuries not mentioned in the earlier report or post-mortem. When her body was taken out, many nuns were nearby, and they also saw these injuries. They noted several marks that hadn't been included in the original post-mortem report. After 7 years of investigation, it became clear that Sister Abhaya did not take her own life. It looked more like a murder, but who did it? The answer will surprise you even more. The CBI admitted, "We know it's a murder, but we still don't know who the killer is." Once again, the court refused to accept this report. Another team was formed, and in 2005, a new investigation was done again. It was stated that the killers could not be identified, and once more the court did not accept this report. The activists outside part of the action committee were now angry. Many talks and conspiracy theories started popping up. Some media reports suggested that the first investigation was poorly handled. They claimed that Sister Abhaya was buried too quickly. Her clothes were burned, and even her diary was destroyed. They felt the post-mortem was incomplete and suspected that powerful people were trying to cover this up. Various theories spread quickly across Kerala. How could such a chaotic scene be part of the case? Why did the evidence disappear? Then a new team began investigating again, and in 2007, a shocking revelation came to music light. By now, the case had been under investigation for 15 years. There were many witnesses, but some had turned against the case, and others had even died. Many suspects had been questioned, but no solid proof was found against anyone. Then, out of nowhere, a witness stepped forward, offering a key clue to the case. But who was this witness? The witness was none other than a thief, an ordinary, unknown thief from 1992. Could his testimony really be trusted? Surprisingly, not only was his statement taken seriously, but it also changed the entire direction of the case. If you watched till here, please give a like.